My name's Phil Czajkowski, and I'm a volunteer at the National Museum of the United States Army. So I'm a retiree from the United States Army. I retired as a command sergeant major, and I just thought it was a great opportunity to share my experiences in the Army and share the Army story and the story of soldiers, what we're all about. Well, there's a lot of really cool stuff in the museum. I think probably my favorite exhibit hall is the Changing World, mostly because that kind of coincides with the period of time that I served in the Army. So kind of from the Cold War on through the Global War on Terror. And I enlisted in 1987, so I started out my career, facing off with the Soviet Union and watched the world change to the wars that we are fighting in the Middle East right now. So I was doing research on the different exhibit halls and trying to learn some cool facts. And one of the things I stumbled across was that the youngest recorded soldier to enlist in the Civil War was a young man named John Lincoln Clem. And he actually enlisted at the age of 9. He was with the 22nd Michigan Volunteers. And by the time the war was over, he was discharged as a sergeant at the age of 13. He actually re-enlisted back in the Army at the age of 19 and was given a commission by then President Ulysses S. Grant. And he went on to serve until 1915 and retired as a brigadier general. Was actually promoted to major general by a special act of Congress a year later. I just thought that was pretty amazing to have someone that started at the age of 9 and basically spent his entire life in the Army, which was pretty cool. Well, as far as interests go, I've always been a fan of history. And for me, what makes history come alive is personal stories and experiences. So whenever I look at the exhibits or whenever I see artifacts, I always try to find examples or stories from people that experienced that time period. So whenever I do docent work or explain things to visitors, I always like to include those personal accounts or personal visits because I think that makes history come alive. People can relate to that more than just facts and figures. So I think my love of history has kind of helped me be a better volunteer at the museum. One of the days that I was volunteering, I was assigned to keep a head count of the different exhibit halls. And so I was kind of standing around in the lobby area and just talking to guests. And as I was standing there, I happened to be standing next to the Army mule. And this little girl who was probably about 4 years old walked up to me and she kind of boldly asked me, "What are you doing here?" I told her that, thinking kind of quickly, I said, "Well, I'm here to make sure that the mule doesn't wander away." And she was just fascinated by that. So she stood there for a couple of minutes with me, staring at the mule, waiting for it to move. And then when she realized that I was joking with her, rather than just walking away or whatever, she actually asked me a whole bunch of really great questions about the mule and about the museum and things like that. And it's probably one of my favorite interactions just because, for a child of that age to be so engaged and just so interested in what was going on at the museum was pretty cool. So that's kind of my favorite story so far. So I joined the Army out of high school. And honestly, originally, I just didn't know what I wanted to do when I was going to college. So my thought was I would enlist, see the world, get some free college money, and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Once I made that decision, my dad had been in the Army, and I remember him telling stories about his experiences there. So I just kind of wandered into an Army recruiter office, and that was where I ended up. It turns out that once I got in the Army, I realized that that was my calling. And the next thing I knew, 25 years had gone by and I was retiring from the Army. So yeah, that's how I ended up in the Army. When I was in Iraq, I had I worked as a mission manager for unmanned aerial vehicles, and I interfaced with the Army and the Air Force. So I was a mission manager for UAVs, like Predators and things like that. And I ended up with a call sign of pterodactyl, and it's kind of an unusual one. People always wonder how I got that one, and it started out as a joke prior to going to Iraq. The guys in the barracks always thought it was funny to have me order the takeout or delivery. And because with a last name like Czajkowski, nobody could ever spell it. So I would always just use my first name. And even then, you would get the folks that would say, well, how do you spell that? And me being who I am, I always phonetically spelled it, but I would say, P as in pterodactyl for Philip. And of course, that always confused people and got a good laugh out of everybody. So once I got to Iraq and the Air Force was like, well, you need to have a call sign, I couldn't think of anything cool. Maverick was already taken. So, there was that. And before I could answer, one of my soldiers chimed in with, well, you should call him pterodactyl. And they were like, well, why pterodactyl? He goes, like a flying dinosaur. He's that old. And it kind of stuck. And for a year and a half when I was in Iraq, I was known as the pterodactyl or Taro. And it was just kind of a funny thing because it all started out as just kind of a joke within a joke. That's kind of one of my favorite stories from that. I think probably the biggest thing is that, to kind of relay to folks that, the people that are in the Army are just your average people, but they do extraordinary things. We're no different than anyone else, but I think that where it really comes into play and where it really makes a difference is, the folks in the Army that have done just incredible things. And, really at the end of the day, they've kind of shaped history. So, they're just the sacrifices that the soldiers make and their families. And that's something that I would, if people could take that away from interacting with me, I would be happy with that. I think probably the biggest thing that I was surprised with volunteering was the fact that I get just as much out of it as I hope the visitors do. It's been really interesting for me to talk to the visitors that come in and, and I'll relay a story. And if they happen to be a vet, they'll relay a story back, which is always fun and cool to see. And it's also just interesting to see folks that maybe don't have a connection with the Army and to hear their thoughts and their preconceived notions or their ideas about what the Army is all about. And I think that's been really, really rewarding for me. It's just been a great experience overall. I'm really glad I did it. If they happen to run into me at the museum, they should ask me the story of being a door gunner in a Russian Mi-8 flying with the Afghan Army in Afghanistan. It's probably the scariest roller coaster ride I've ever been on in my life, but one of those rare experiences that I never would have guessed that I would have had the opportunity to do. So if they're interested in that, they should ask me about that. They seem. I think all of it. I know that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think what's really interesting about the National Museum of the Army is that there's a little bit of everything. So it's not just a bunch of dusty old relics in a case. There's the interactive displays, there's videos, there's all the docents and the volunteers that have all their great stories and experiences that they can share. The art museum, or the art exhibit, the experiential learning for the kids. I mean, there's truly something for everyone. And I think that it's the totality of the museum that makes it worthwhile, because it's not only is it educational, but it it's a good place to kind of, enlighten yourself and maybe think about some of the exhibits and, just the history of the Army and the history of the country that happens to correspond with that. So I think it's kind of, I think it's all worth the wait, and it's just getting better all the time.